Okay, so we're going live now. So welcome everyone to Masters and Robots. Some of you who've been watching for the last 2 days, others are just joining us now. So welcome to everyone. I just want to say, let's say the official introduction, which is in a program, and then we'll go a little bit more informal. So we have a roundtable discussion on a modern transport hub and its effect on the economy and society. And this is co-created with the Solidarity Transport Hub. And we have Dagmara to tell us more about this. Just as an introduction, the speed of technological change combined with an increasing emphasis on green and sustainable solutions is having a huge impact on global, national and regional transport networks and the urban environments around them, both new and existing. So with Poland set to develop Solidarity Transport Hub, intended to be a brand new regional air and rail center for Central Eastern Europe, close to the city of Warsaw, this session will look at the environment in which such a scheme is being planned and constructed, and what elements it needs to keep in mind in order to best serve tomorrow's never normal world. The panel discussion will discuss the future of cities and transportation with a focus on sustainable growth, green solutions, and intelligent infrastructure. Additionally, during the roundtable, we will analyze the benefits for society, both in terms of climate and economy. And we have a really fantastic and diverse panel, starting with Dagmara Zawadzka, who's Managing Director of Solidarity Transport Hub Poland. Dagmara has been engaged in Solidarity Transport Hub project for 3 years, being a member of the advisory committee for Solidarity Transport Hub and as a vice chairman of the supervisory board. She has 20 years of professional experience in management and finance. And Dagmara, you will introduce the project in a few minutes. Is there anything else you want to add to that introduction about yourself?
No, thank you.
Okay. So then we have Lisa, who many of you are familiar with as one of the speakers from yesterday and in previous editions. Lisa is a deep tech pioneer, a VC adjunct at Singapore Management University. She is a serial entrepreneur who has worked for over 20 years on the cutting edge of innovation, technology, and strategy consulting. Lisa, would you like to add anything to that? Not yet. Okay, great. Then we have Ivona Bajinska from Alstom. Ivona is communications director at Alstom, a global leader of smarter and greener mobility on Central and Eastern European markets. Alstom not only provides transportation vehicles, trains, trams, buses, hydrogen trains, e-buses, and services and maintenance, but also offers mobility solutions to shape tomorrow's mobility. Ivona, do you want to add anything to that at the moment?
No, thanks a lot.
Okay. Then we have Vijay Kesavanaman, environmental scientist and transportation planner. Vijay is an environmental scientist and transportation planner with an expertise in preparing cities and communities for the impacts of climate change. From delivering climate change vulnerability assessments for the city of Cambridge and Boston Logan Airport to helping drive regional policy around emissions reduction strategies, community-based planning, and transportation investments. Vijay has a well-rounded appreciation for how transport hubs center the conversation around resilience, equity, and smart city planning. Vijay, would you like to add anything to that?
Oh, that was brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks. And last but not least, we have Terence Yap from GuardForce. Terence is currently the chairman of GuardForce AI Co. Limited, a group focusing on delivering technologically innovative security solutions within the Asia-Pacific region. Terence has more than 25 years of experience in various industries, including telecommunications, security, and smart cities development. Over the years, he has developed specific skill sets that have facilitated change management, investor relations, capital markets, operations, corporate restructuring, profit and loss ownership, responsibility, and people management. So a very broad perspective there. Now, that's like the, let's say, official descriptions. this is a very real topic for us. My name is Richard Stevens. I'm the founder and editor of Poland Today. I'm an English guy who's been in Poland for many years. There is a plan in Poland, as our panelists know, and many of you watching know, to build a regional transport hub. And so it's a very, very hot topic here in Poland, and it's great to have a mix of international experts, also with a very different perspectives, to give their experience and input on what a project like this needs to take into account so that it is modern, sustainable, and is the best it can be. So without further ado, I'd like to pass on to Dagmara. Dagmara, if you could just tell us about the project, because it's not just an airport project, it's a rail project. So over to you, Dagmara.
Thank you, Richard, for your introduction and for giving me the chance to open our discussion. As the subject of our discussion is the modern transport hub and its effects on society, I would like to start my short presentation from the railway part of the project, because railway is in general perceived as green, but also because of the fact that we have a lot of social priorities included in this part of the project. But also later on, I will demonstrate that we look at the airport part of the project from the innovative and sustainable perspective. So starting with the railway part, the project assumes building so-called hub and spoke system. It means that we plan to build 10 spokes that will be running from different parts of Poland to the STH and to Warsaw. And in order to achieve this system, we have to build 1.8 thousand kilometers of new railway lines. And part of these lines will be completed till 2027 and the rest by the end of 2034. The investment program of STH assumes the construction of high-speed railways with speed limit up to 250 kilometers per hour, which will connect most regions of Poland with Warsaw and with STH within 2.5 hours. And the question is why we are doing this. What will it bring? So we strongly believe that this will enable unprecedented change in mobility, not only for passengers traveling to the airport or from the airport, but in general to passengers traveling in Poland, traveling to Warsaw and other cities along railway. It is probably difficult to believe that there are some large cities in Poland, for example, Łomża, that do not have railway connection at all. And our project assumes the fight against transport exclusion. And we believe that we are a unique opportunity to put such cities as Łomża along STH spokes and finally restore the railway to many regions in Poland. So summing up, we want all inhabitants of all regions of Poland to have equal access to railway, and this is our main goal. And now going a little bit more to the airport part of the project. As probably all of you know, we plan to build completely new airport. It will be 40 kilometers from Warsaw, but we assume very good connection by train, so it will be possible to reach the airport within 15 minutes traveling from Warsaw by high-speed train. One of the important elements of STH project is to build this airport, the airport that is rooted in sustainability. So our ambition is to be a good neighbor, to be a social responsible business, and to be environmentally conscious partner. And our strategy is based on our sustainability strategy is based on 5 pillars. These pillars are electromobility, green infrastructure, effective airspace management, as well as eco-shift and smart airports. And I would like to say just a few words about each of these pillars, and I believe that this will be a good base for our roundtable discussion. So the first pillar is green infrastructure. Our aspiration is to build the airport. Our aspiration is that the airport will be built according to ecological construction standards. And such guidelines was given to architectural studios that presented their concept of airport last year. And of course, a big attention is also put to renewable energy. We assume supplying majority of electricity energy demand by relying on green sources. The second pillar is electromobility. The solution prepared by SPH include, among others, electric and in future possibly autonomous vehicles performing tasks without or with limited need for human intervention. As an example, I can give within airside operation, we assume, for example, driverless shuttle buses. And within landside operation, for example, assistant robots that could support passengers by analyzing their verbal requests or scanning their boarding passes and guiding them to appropriate location at the airport. The third pillar is about air traffic. Our goal is to make it more ecological too, thanks to more effective solutions for airspace management, and we do it in line with Digital European Sky Initiative. When we talk about our project, we also think very strongly about aviation biofuels. We want to provide carriers operating at SPH with possibility to use aviation biofuels, thanks to which significant reduction of carbon footprint could be achieved. And the last pillar is about smart airport, about smart airport city. We assume using intelligence sensor, and this is a vital element of our project. So summing up, due to the fact that it is a greenfield project and we can use all possible innovative solutions, we really believe that we can build a modern airport, which will be one of the best airports in the world. Thank you very much, and I hope my short introduction will be a good base for our roundtable discussion.
Thank you very much, Dagmara. It is very good because this is a discussion on, it's not just a discussion on the Solidarity Transport Hub, it's a discussion on modern airports, hubs, mobility, etc. But it's very good to have this discussion rooted in a real project. So we'll come back. This session is 1 hour. We are 45 minutes into it. We'll have now, Lisa will give a kind of broader perspective for 3, 4, 5 minutes. Then I will ask a question to each of our panelists, and then we'll go into a discussion. And please, informality rules. If there's something you don't quite understand, or if you want someone to explain something, or please go ahead. Don't wait for me. If you want to ask a question to someone, please go ahead. So saying that, Lisa, over to you.
Wonderful, thank you, Richard. I would start by being a little provocative, given that we are living in this era of COVID-19. So as you can see, I'm speaking to you today from my office in Singapore, where an entire smart nation is still largely at home, The streets tonight are empty and silent, and our movement has been reduced to the minimum in order to contain the expansion of this virus. And in these days, it's almost impossible not to think about when back in the 1980s, various sociologists envisaged the end of the city, the progressive nebulization of a traditional city thanks to mass digital connectivity that would enable our desynchronized society to operate in a radically different way, massively reducing this need of physical interaction. Now, reality, as you know, has proven to be much different, as cities are showing to be by far our preferred stage where we love to live, learn, and work. And in the last decade, we've witnessed an exponential growth in per capita kilometers consumption. And instead of slowing down because of climate change issues, we've just kept on moving more and more, a totally unsustainable pattern. So can we say now that the desire for physical connectivity is so undeniably strong that we cannot conceive a progressive reduction of our hyper-mobile society? COVID-19 is really giving us an opportunity to reimagine what mobility looks like. And although we are social animals and we do need to interact physically, it is undeniably true that thanks to mass digital connectivity, we can now also more and more interact efficiently. This digital handshake, the ability to substitute our physical connection through digital technology and generate the same levels of trust and intimacy, while they might not just be there yet, this mass connectivity already allows us to efficiently interact in large numbers of people, as we can see here at Masters and Robots tonight. So we know by now that cities are not going to fade away, but rather the opposite, that they're getting larger and larger. But we also know that we can reduce a relevant part of our trips thanks to our ability to digitally connect close enough to have a digital handshake. And this pressing danger we feel because of the virus, while it has forced us to change our habits, we can now imagine the possibility of systemically changing our travel agenda, massively impacting those emission patterns. Here in Singapore, I used to spend 50 to 80% of my time traveling across the region. As you can see, here I am still trapped in my home. Now, the words of Federico Parolotto, an international transport minister in Milan, also believes that digital connectivity might just emerge as the most promising transportation technology innovation. But in the last 100 years, transportation advancements have steamed past rail cars of the 1800s to bring us automobiles that will soon reach complete and total autonomy, trains that are already autonomous, heavy vehicles that are autonomous, and passenger aircraft that will literally crush the sound barrier. And in this rapidly progressing environment, it's easy to think of trains as an outdated technology and a bit of a vehicle of the past, but they're not. In fact, trains may actually be the future of travel, especially given our increasing congestion of roadways. Trains offer significant advantages found in no other transportation method. And as the world heads into the next decade with scarcer resources, climate change, and higher urban populations, there's going to be an ever-growing demand for faster and efficient travel that is both safe and affordable. I'd like to give two quick examples. In China, with the One Belt, One Road initiative, we have seen 36,000 kilometers of high-speed rail put across the nation. Why? Because they firmly believe that high-speed rail delivers fast, efficient transportation so that riders can save time, energy, and money. They are extremely reliable and operate in all weather conditions on time. They're not subject to congestion. And from a country perspective, it offers increased national security for all. Is there no end to this promise? Well, my own country, Australia, for the past 30 years have denied us the opportunity for high-speed rail travel. And it's interesting to see why. They looked at it purely economically, and they said that it was unsuitable for the broad geography of our country. When researchers calculated $1 invested in high-speed rail would actually generate $2.30 in benefits, such as time travel saved, avoiding vehicle operation costs, and reducing road congestion, it failed to monetize or quantitate exactly what that meant for social cohesion, to factor how the supply chains of our businesses might change under the influence of city-shaping projects, or how the housing preferences might shift. And also, it failed to quantify what the effect of high-speed rail would do if it included more compact and walkable cities with less car dependency and greater productivity. connectivity. And we believe that it really should continue to keep its grip on Australian imagination. Now, I'm living in a smart city one that combines data, resources, infrastructure, and its people to continually focus on improving our livability. It's an aggregation of power and creativity, but also it's a body of data and live analysis. It has a soul, it sets goals, it shares passions. And if a smart city can be so equated with a human, that smart mobility is a city's circulatory system. A smart city in combination with smart mobility offers residents, visitors, and stakeholders a quality of life, an ease of experience, and an economic prosperity that preemptively addresses our needs, our desires, and our transport requires. It's an enticing proposition. It has enormous potential, both social and economic. But this shift too brings opportunities and challenges for governments, for industries, for corporates and society, as together we reimagine in a post-COVID world what transport is going to look like in an on-demand and digital world. I hand it over to our esteemed panelists. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. So that's a broader perspective. We're going to go now to a more practical approach, or not an approach, but saying what a company like Alstom, which is actually looking to be involved potentially in the upcoming project, is doing train services. So Ivona will say a few words. Ivona, what's important for Alstom when approaching a transport project like Solidarity Transport Hub?
So there's no doubt that such projects are super interesting and super important for the mobility industry, including Alstom, for many reasons. I would like to mention 3 reasons: sustainability, business development, and societal perspective. As for sustainability, Dagmara already mentioned that railway is perceived as green, and it also it really is much more green than a car. If you just imagine, it's interesting to visualize that a car can take up to 4 people. A bus, let's say 100, a train such as Pendolino, 400 people, and high capacity trains, for example, double-deckers that are considered to be included in the Solidarity Hub can take up to 800 people. Moreover, these trains can be connected, can be combined into one. And for example, there is a double-decker, 2 double-deckers that are connected that run now from Paris to Lyon that can take up to 1,500 people. So it's potentially 1,500 cars less on that route. It's really impressive. It's so much less CO2 emissions. And this is a very important perspective for Alstom and for the whole mobility industry, because we are really at the junction of the 2 conflicting trends. So on one hand, we have urbanization and the need for accessible mobility and the green mobility, because on the other hand, we have this urgent need to prevent further climate crisis by decarbonizing all the industries, transportation including. And we really do have a solution that satisfies both these needs, because as I mentioned on the example, metros, trains, buses, a great alternative to a car. A mass transportation can really help lower CO2 emissions. Some of these solutions, they even offer 0 emissions, like hydrogen trains, battery trains, electric buses. As Lisa mentioned, people want to move, people want to travel, people want to commute, and we have a hypermobile society, which is inevitable, and I think this trend will grow. So sustainability on one hand, there's also an interesting data by United Nations Global Compact organization that 75% of Europeans live in the cities right now, and the two biggest challenges of European cities out of 5 are the decarbonization and public transportation. So this is a very important perspective for us, sustainability. The second perspective, business opportunity, of course, this is very important because we're talking 160 very high-speed trains up to 250 kilometers per hour, and several thousand kilometers of new high-speed trains lines. And Alstom has expertise in both of these areas. For example, Not everybody knows that Pendolino trains were the first high-speed trains to be introduced in Poland and are operating successfully, visiting 34 Polish cities every day, 20 trains. And so we are very much looking forward to introducing more of such high-quality, high-speed trains to Poland within the in the initiatives such as the Solidarity Hub. The third perspective that I mentioned, the societal perspective, it's also quite interesting because I don't know if you heard about the phenomenon which was called Pendolino effect, that once Pendolino trains were actually introduced to Poland, when people experience this high quality trains with a different kind of experience on the journey, the popularity of rail in Poland and the overall interest in traveling by trains increased. So we call it Pendolino effect, and I truly believe that we can hope for the Solidarity Hub effect with even more people traveling, using mass transportation and exploring Poland. Because for me, it's quite important that the Solidarity Hub, it does not only develop and bring opportunities to travel abroad to get quicker to the airport so that we can fly away, but also there will be a lot of people who would just use this network to change between the cities, to be able to get from south of Poland to the north of Poland in less than 5 hours, which is impossible with current infrastructure. So we would have much more people traveling, we would have much more local tourism, and we would have a significant decrease in car travels in Poland, which is super sustainable. And also, I would like to refer to what Dagmara said, that yes, again, railway is perceived as green, but also railway is perceived, and it really is inclusive because everybody can afford it. Anybody can afford to travel, to explore. So this third societal perspective is also quite interesting.
Thank you very much, Ivana. So now over to you, Vijay. From an environmental perspective, what advice would you give to a project like Solidarity Transport Hub? What should the project take into account, and what should it really implement? What must it implement from an environmental point of view, from your perspective?
We can't hear you.
Thank you. So first of all, this being a new construction project, I mean, this is an opportunity that we don't really get to see very often when we think about the climate risks that, as you say, a non-normal environment that we're encountering in the present day. Mega infrastructure projects, typically, we want to understand that the project life cycle is going to be 50, 100, hundreds of 50 years. And you need to think through the design and resiliency standards that you want to implement at the very outset when you're really looking to invest billions of dollars potentially in infrastructure. We've seen it already happening when we were working on projects on the East Coast due to hurricanes, storms, massive infrastructure failures in New York and Boston resulted in millions of dollars of damage. These were unavoidable costs. So before shovel gets to the ground, being able to conceptualize at the very outset the capital costs that would include floodproofing standards, standards for how you would modernize rail, standards for how you would implement subterranean operational measures in case you have ground flooding, various climate risks that might be considered in the 2030s, 50s, 70s, really make you think about the cost envelope of engineering and design. And that's very, very important in the beginning because that kind of creates the standards for operational and maintenance work that this asset would have to maintain for decades on. So at the very beginning, being able to have that opportunity is absolutely massive. There's the other aspect of thinking through rail is especially because some of the rail network is established in Poland, and it's not just about new construction, it's about modernization. And modernization of rail is going to have implications in different parts of Poland where this infrastructure has been around for decades and needs to be modernized. So the question that comes into play is how are you establishing capital and budgeting protocols so that you're addressing and prioritizing areas that might be of highest risk to things like groundwater flooding or sea level rise. And that's where nature-based adaptation solutions, as we've seen in the United States, have been valuable, because we're looking at the system holistically. We're addressing both the infrastructure gap, but recognizing the local area might provide some nature-based opportunities to reduce the impacts of certain types of climate impacts, such as sea level rise. For example, coastal wetlands are a very, very important feature in the Bay Area, where we emphasize investments in coastal wetland restoration strategies, which provides its own form of protections from things like wave attenuation and storm surge. And that's provided a reduced cost in the terms of modernizing the railways that are alongside and are already facing flooding. So in general, I would recommend, especially at the outset of a major capital investment, that we look into the development of resiliency standards, and that engineering criteria has a climate risk filter in it. I understand that in Poland, there's robust understanding of the climate adaptation landscape. There's robust understanding of the standards that we would need to adapt to. So understanding the project lifecycle in terms of how long do we want this asset to last, and also accepting a certain amount of climate risk, recognizing that most assets in 365 days of a year may achieve 80% operational standard, 90% operational standard, 95% operational standard. And that in itself is success, and recognizing that minimizing those disruptions is the protocol for the day. We're not going to see 100% of the time things working, but we have to understand that in that 5% fail rate or the 10% fail rate, you're looking at both the equity, that the communities that are dependent on these systems are not the ones that are the hardest affected, and that the stakeholders that are decision makers to this process understand that when that happens, they have protocols for emergency response, and they know exactly how to proceed during those windows of time when failure might be inevitable.
Fantastic, Vijay. Thank you very much. Those are elements that we will discuss in the discussion coming very soon. So thanks very much for giving the environmental, let's say, perspective. Terence, you come from a security perspective. What are the main factors in terms of, again, when you have a project like Solidarity Transport Hub or any airport, but let's say on a bigger scale, a transport hub, what does such a project need to take into account from a security perspective? And maybe in terms of airport, could you just define security briefly? So, sure. Terence, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And first of all, Dr. Marin, this is a very exciting time for you and also for Poland. It's certainly a development phase, and I've seen it happen in Hong Kong and also in China. In my business itself, we have done airport securities, we've done transportation hubs from the airport security point of view, because you're dealing with a different kind of risk profile now. You've got people who are coming in, you've got left luggages issues. So in certain airports, we have actually seen a deployment of more analytics, behavioral analytics, data analysis, and even to a certain extent, AI as well, to predict before an event happens. Quite often, we usually see CCTV cameras all over the place. But you got to remember, the CCTV is just an extension of a camera. At the control center, historically, you have all these TV stations, and the eyeball is not going to be able to predict anything. All you see are just pictures. So moving forward, there are actually a lot of areas where you can actually use analytical behavior to predict. If a bag is left there, how long was it left there, and who was the last person to touch it, etc. So those were the things that we looked at, especially in the airports. We actually did Thailand as well, Suvarnabhumi Airport, for the security, not only for the cameras, but also for the passport check-ins. So those are some of the things that we looked at the security point of view. Richard, if I may also comment a few things about the railway and also the transportation hub as well, from my own personal observation in Hong Kong.
Please go ahead, yes.
There were a couple of factors that I saw when Hong Kong started to build the high-speed railway. Hong Kong completed the high-speed railway 2 years ago in 2018. It is now connected to the world's largest high-speed rail network connection. As mentioned by Lisa, it's now 36,000 kilometers, growing to about 70,000 kilometers by, I think, another 10 years' time. So that was completed. What was also completed a month earlier was the Hong Kong, Zhuhai, Macau Bridge, which in history right now is the longest sea crossing bridge in the whole world, which spans across 3 different cities. There are implications to it. And from my observation, and perhaps I would love to share, and perhaps certain things can take over as well. A is the regional impact. When they started to build the railway, high-speed rail, and also for the Zhuhai Macau Bridge, they looked at how the Greater Bay Area were to grow, how to stimulate growth. Hong Kong has always been the financial sector. With the burgeoning of China itself, we need to reinvent Hong Kong. And so the government started to reinvent Hong Kong. China looked at the possibility of igniting the growth of Western Guangzhou, because Southern Guangdong area, you've got Shenzhen and Guangzhou itself, it's booming because of the proximity to Hong Kong. But Western Guangdong was lagging. You also have Macau, which was historically a Portuguese enclave, known for gambling, etc. And they were trying to reinvent itself. Now, you've got 3 cities trying to reinvent, trying to make themselves relevant in a new world. And so the transportation hub was probably a key for it. The Hong Kong, Zhuhai, Macau Bridge connected all these 3 cities, reduced the traveling time from 3 hours to just 45 minutes. The Hong Kong high-speed rail actually creates a lot of mobility, as you have mentioned, Domera, in terms of increasing people moving around, which actually facilitates economic and social development. You add it with the airport. Hong Kong is still very much, of course, now it's an interesting situation, but if you add the airport, the high-speed rail, and the Hong Kong-Zhuhai Bridge, you've got an interesting hub that actually creates a lot of buzz, trade, mobility, and economic and social development in the whole region. There are security implications as well. Now, maybe different from Poland. In my example here, you've got security implications because you've got cross-border, passport checking, etc. So you're actually crossing the border into 3 different areas. From Hong Kong, you're going to China. From China, you're going to Macau. Macau going to China, etc. So passport control was really a key part. How do you control the flow of people? Security part of it as well, in terms of checking the baggages, in terms of where do we do it, the legal implications. Now, you may also need to consider that as you build the highway rail connecting the rest of Europe as well. The increasing of mobility will also increase the mobility of criminals. So you may need to think about how to figure that out as part of the less mentioned darker side of things. But the third factor which I thought about was the development of a city. Transportation hubs, especially in Hong Kong and right now in China and also Macau, it's interesting because it's also almost like a green field. Mm-hmm. I love green fields because green fields, you can try out anything. You do not have the legacy or the burden of things that you find. You're just going from new. So Hong Kong and China, they have started to build small communities, cities around the railway stations. So they spend a lot of money to design the stations, to make it look like a shopping mall, to make it more accessible, to increase commerce, to allow people to go there more often, to even live on top of the stations, to play and travel. So these are all verticals of a smart city. Smart cities is a city where you want people to live, play, work, and be there, to stay there. That is the whole purpose. Of course, with the technology itself in Greenfield, You can have things like, I know in Hong Kong, you've got proximity scanning, etc. You've got connections with the local transportations. You've got IoT sensors that actually can install, etc. And you can even predict the next train, where is your a lot of analysis they can do. So you are given a blank sheet to try out a lot of different things. And that is the most exciting part of it. But the key part is to figure out a way to let your residents use it more often, to live around it, play around it, and work there if possible. So that's just my 5 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terence. I mean, this is such a broad thing. We only have an hour, and as we all know, panels, these topics are so huge, but it does give you a taste, and it does give you a lot to think about, and having the perspectives from various parts of the world. So I want to pass back to Dagmara. Dagmara, this is a kind of big ask. If you can distill a little bit about what you just heard and how it relates to, a very real project, Solidarity Transport Hub. We heard about the resiliency test, about things like flooding. It just occurs to me that you guys at Solidarity Transport Hub have to think about everything, the security, the passport control, everything. So I hope that you can help us distill a little bit from your perspective. So Dagmara, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and for your very interesting recommendations. For sure, with our team, we will analyze your recommendations and we will take it into account. I think that I should say that our project is not only about railway, not only about airport, but also we plan to build airport city. Especially this recommendation could be interesting for us because now we are finalizing our strategy within this area. I don't know, maybe you have further questions to me about our project.
Well, I'll jump in with one question, then I'll open to you if anyone wants to any of you want to ask questions. Again, COVID is talked about, but for a very good reason, because it's the biggest disruptor of our lifetimes. And everyone is reassessing, personally and big corporations and small business, everyone is reassessing. Has Solidarity Transport Hub, I'm not trying to say considering whether you will do it or not, but what has COVID-19 told you a little bit about? It's kind of, in a way, for you, it may be even, let's say, a good thing, because it forces you to look at worst case scenarios for transport, etc. So what has COVID impacted on the project?
Mm-hmm. We assume that our airport will be the capacity at the beginning of in 2027, the capacity of the airport will be 45 million passengers. This was our assumption that we made 3 years ago. But now we have to analyze again what is the real need, and we are going to do it soon, because within 2 months we will start our work on master plan. And the first analysis that we are going to do, it is the analysis of the growth of the market, and for sure COVID will influence the results of this analysis. So probably at the beginning of the next year, we will be ready with the answer how COVID will influence our project in a worst scenario.
If anyone has a question, please jump in now. I have a few more, but I want to... Or a comment on what another panelist has said. So I would like to, again, come back to you, Dagmara. Vijay raised the question of how long an asset is planned for. Do you have a plan for how long, how long you want Solidarity Transport Hub to last for as an asset? I mean, it's a very hard question to, or something to analyze, but what is your perspective on that?
We have very long time perspective. The project is will be developed in phases. So at the beginning, as I mentioned, we want to build the airport for 45 million passengers, but we assume that in the future, for example, in 30 years or in 50 years, we will need a bigger airport, and it will be possibility to, to scale it up. So the perspective is extremely long, I would say.
Dagmara, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What are the based on your projected energy demands for running and maintaining both the air and rail systems, is there going to be a new energy grid being brought online? Is it connections to an existing energy grid that's close by or far away?
Probably we will need a new energy plant for the project, but it hasn't been decided yet. We are in the process of analyzing. And also, as I mentioned, we start our work with master plan with external advisor.
Right.
And probably this answer will come also in the near future, within next year.
Wonderful. I think overall, the schematic for considering, bringing online whole new infrastructure is always the question of your transmission and distribution lines, your energy grid. Those are the really critical dependencies that you need to make sure that your systems are running smoothly. The same applies for wastewater and sanitation, especially as you said, you're going to have an airport city that you're really conceptualizing and want to see built out. So in any of the design concepts and the expertise that you're bringing in from architects is proposing the question of how are these systems collaboratively building out this reality, this vision that you have? How is the water and sewer, the transmission and distribution lines, those, the cardiovascular of your system going to really move things forward?
Mm-hmm. It's true. We are analyzing this, and I want to emphasize only that we really want to use green energy, and this is our priority.
Brilliant.
I have a question. Let's moving away from Asia and from Poland and the region. Vijay, you're based in the US, I understand.
Yes, I'm in San Francisco.
Okay. Just in a nutshell, I think I hope I'm not mistaken to say that the American rail system is kind of seen as a bit behind the times, and most people don't think about, traveling by rail in America. It's maybe only Joe Biden who we hear about.
Right.
Do you see an impending, let's say, explosion in a positive way of rail travel in America, or do you think that American transport habits are just so ingrained in their cars and the flights, from your perspective?
That's a great question. The American paradigm, does trend to still be in the sort of 50s, 60s. You got to own your own vehicle, jet down the freeway in a single occupancy car. And as a transportation planner who serves the Bay Area, which is the 9 counties of the Bay Area, 7 million people, 101 cities, planning to encourage people out of their cars is an unpopular move, but it is a necessary move. The massive movement of people is really our goal. And high-speed rail has been a huge conversation, for example, in California, connecting the Bay Area with LA. It's fraught with some of its challenges related to financing. So there's both the cultural aspect of people really want to stay in their cars, but Amtrak is a regional rail network that is still heavily used. Obviously, in the era of the pandemic, it has become a little less popular, and people aren't using public transit, for example. So the subway network is at 30% capacity currently. But what we're trying to do in the Bay Area as a metropolitan planning organization is really lean into an understanding of how public transit is being impacted, and that we actually see density as a positive thing. cities are going to stay even in a post-pandemic era. And so how do we create mobility and accessibility for the vast majority of people that actually, frankly, can't afford to have a car and do want to have access to public transit and will be using the rail and the subway network system? So it's making sure that we're affording them the safe, affordable option to use public transit. We have the CARES Act that unlocked $1.8 billion specifically for the Bay. The MPO that I serve, we're working on a recovery task force for understanding in our current very sensitive era, how do we make sure we encourage people to be able to use public transit safely, because that's adding another layer of discomfort, another layer of, oh, I'd rather just drive to work. But you know, it's a very compelling case when you're on a freeway for 2.5 hours, getting from point A to point B, because you can't get to work any other way. And so the very fact that single occupancy vehicle usage is leading to massive congestion, it's slowly tipping the scales for people to consider other mobility options.
So my computer seems to have gone slow, but I just wanted to ask you in a nutshell, because we've got 10 minutes. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you just put up a thumbs up if it's okay? Okay, good. Thank you. So we've got 10 left, and at the end, we'd like to go back to Dagmara for a status update about the project. So now, very quick, just to finish that, Vijay, in let's say 20 seconds, if you can say, are you actually hopeful that rail travel will come to America strongly, or just not at all? Or not,
it will
no
come
big
back
change?
Strongly. I think it will be led by the East and the West Coast. I think cities on the East and the West Coast, LA, San Francisco, Boston, New York, are going to help lead the way in that and show examples of how this could work. Yes.
Well, that's very good to hear. Ivona, if I can ask you from a personal, I hope you can answer from a personal perspective. What do you hope for, as just a Polish person, you know, who wants to see their country develop? What do you hope for that the Solidarity Transport Hub will provide, in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, I hope that it will bring such a nice level of customer experience for Polish people on the journey that they will be willing to switch, exactly as Vijay said, to change, to swap the car with the train, and it really can be a nice experience, a pleasant journey, and the more high-speed trains, the more quality vehicles, the more happy people. So this is and more people on the trains, more people on the move, more people exploring the country, more people included in that experience. So this is my personal hope. And honestly, Polish people really start to appreciate that, because you'd be surprised to know that when people buy a ticket for a train, and they buy a ticket for a specifically Pendolino train, and then the train had an accident and it's not available that day, and the other train is serving them, they file complaints. They complain because they are getting used to the fact that they need some expected level of comfort. So this is really a nice trend, and this is what I'm hoping for.
Thank you, Ivona.
Better customer experience.
Absolutely. Terence, again, in a nutshell. Passenger experience. Okay, great. Terence, in a nutshell, you've seen these big transport hubs come up in Asia and you know, around. What sort of impact have they made on society?
Well, yes, actually created mini satellite cities where people actually go in Singapore. You've got the MTR station where it's got food courts, etc. In Hong Kong, people live on top of the train stations, cinemas, shopping malls. It's all about creating the customer experience, having the satellite hubs there, the station being the satellite hub.
Thank you, Terence. That's going to be fascinating for Solidarity Transport Hub, because it's between two big cities, and whether another city can come out from a totally greenfield site. I live 20 kilometers away, and there's nothing there at the moment. So that is fascinating to see. Lisa, if I can ask you in a nutshell, I don't know, you have such a broad expertise, so I don't know if this question's a little bit unfair, and maybe to spring it on you in the last 6 minutes. But this morning we heard from one of the experts, Carlo, who said that trains could be threatened by the fact that in 20 years or so, there will be driverless cars, and people will just be able to drive in the car effortlessly. And maybe that point and any other point you want to make in this broader context. Over to you, Lisa, just in a nutshell.
Yeah, I just want to say, and I'll just throw my Australian hat on, right? Because we face such geographic distances, much like Poland and much like the US. This opportunity to bring rail to air has created such an opportunity in rural Australia, in regional Australia. I work on 2 food security projects, one on meat and one on fruit. How do we get it sustainably from farm to the exported country safely, securely, and without COVID, as part of our kind of digital analytics projects. And this opportunity for regional Australia has just become so significant. So we are doing, multiple flights a week direct to China with our produce. That was never heard of before. And now our meat and livestock producers in Australia are producing, exponential profits in comparison to the past. So I really have seen that opportunity of development come out of rural and regional Australia on the back of this opportunity to bring rail to air. And I do significantly see the potential from a green perspective not to utilize those autonomous cars. I don't mind if they're electric, but the need to actually have them on the road at all when you have such significant infrastructure. I personally haven't driven a car in 6 years. I don't need to. I have such wonderful infrastructure in my city that I just haven't needed to get into a car. And that's amazing, because when I lived in Australia, I couldn't go to the corner store without getting in my car. So I hope that everyone has the wonderful experience that I've had, and that I could live in a society where you just don't need to hop in a car.
Lisa, thank you. Dagmara, the final word really goes to you. I will sum up briefly at the end. You have about 3 minutes. Could we have a bit of a status report? Where are you right now, again, in a nutshell, in terms of the Solidarity Transport Hub?
Okay, maybe before I sum up and I will present the status of the project, I would like to comment on what Ivona and Lisa said about railway system. So we really want to make rail transport more attractive for Polish citizens, and we want to make it as a good alternative for cars and for buses. And of course, the passenger experience is extremely important for us, and we want to make this experience better and better. To say a few words where we are with the project, so we have already done a lot of work in this initial phase of the project. So first of all, 2 years ago, the legislative framework was approved, and the SPV, our company, was created 2 years ago, and we managed to recruit a team of professionals who are ready to develop the project. We also secured the initial financing from the budget, from the state budget. We engaged key stakeholders who want to do the project with us. And this is the initial phase. We also developed first strategic analysis, the initial business plan for all parts of the project. But now we are in the front of the next stage. As I have mentioned before, we will start our work on master plan within probably 2 months, because we are in the process of the tender, and it will be finalized in 1 month or 2 months from now. And next year and a half, we will be working on our master plan, supported not only by a master plan advisor, but also by strategic advisor. And after this, we will be ready to go to the design stage. And hopefully in 2023, we will start execution to be ready with our hub in 2027. And
thank you very
again,
much.
I would like to thank you very much for all for sharing your experience and also for all very interesting recommendations that for sure we will take into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dagmara. I think that, you know, whatever your position on different matters, everyone wants to see an eco-friendly, a sustainable, a secure project in any part of the world. And this huge project is one of the most exciting infrastructure transport projects in the world. And you do have that advantage of, you know, taking the best technology, best advice from around the world. And we do know from a famous neighboring project that success is not guaranteed. But, you know, it's good to see that Solidarity Transport Hub is open to input from all around the world. And from your various places, different time zones. I know, Vijay, for you, it's very early in the morning. Lisa, I think it's later. Terence, I think it's later. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And yeah, 1 hour, you just get a feeling for things, but it's a very important taste of this whole topic of Transport Hub. So thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.